Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Arthur Nobel, the principal at Knight Capital. Arthur, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I'm really looking forward for this chat.
I love your story and the amazing job that you are doing for the tech ecosystem, but better than everyone to tell the story, why don't you share with the audience who is Arthur Nobel?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Sure thing. So I joined Startup World in 2014, basically shortly after figuring out that I wasn't really into the corporate world. And I really learned, I would say, the startup drill at Rocket Internet. I worked for one of their ventures, and it was like a great adventure going from, I would say, C to a Series A type of stage as a company, and in Europe as well as Southeast Asia, to really get this multicultural perspective. From there, I basically worked for several ventures and different types of projects. I would say venture development was really the thing I liked most because of its diversity. And from there, I actually thought, okay, I really want to go away from the operator model, but go to get more of a top-down perspective on startups. So I joined the VC world and worked for 2 VCs there. And then after another year, I thought like, okay, I know the operator side, I know the VC side. Let's build my own company because I totally know how to do it.
Well done.
At least that was the assumption. Yeah, and it turned out it was I wanted to enable remote work to the masses. And now in 2021, looking backwards, we really know that we had a great vision on the world, but we were a bit ahead of the market. So after some time running FlexPad, my own company, and raising funds, building teams, I unfortunately had to close it down. And from there, I specialized in growth. And since 1 year ago, I joined Knight Capital to help the fund get bigger.
That's an amazing story. As I said, really being an operator, an investor, starting up your own company. I like the way, and we will talk more about that. You have recently wrote a book with another 2 co-authors, and I will already introduce the topic. The way you introduce yourself in the book, and I'm really kind of you to already shared it with me, a book where I've participated. That you have went from hype to disillusionment while running your startup. This is quite interesting, right? So we have operated experience, and this happened also in my career. So I've been seeing my parents leading a shoes companies. Unfortunately, it went bankrupted, and I thought that if I was able to lead the company, I would avoid them to go bankruptcy. Then I had opportunity myself to be a CEO of an agency, and I thought, okay, this will scale like hell with me at the helm. And then I started Scaleup Valley. Every single adventure were amazing. At the beginning, a lot of times I thought that I knew it all, right? And it didn't help a lot to not have that adventurous mindset and to be really open and beginner mindset instead of the expert mindset. So in that sense, could you share a little bit more about, you had really that operator and VC experience. What were some of the lessons and that journey and the way you describe it from hype to disillusionment?
Yeah, so when I started FlexPad, we were actually experimenting with things like universal basic income and a lot of other things, because we and that is where we started. And it was a 2-sided marketplace, so to speak. So we had tech developers on the one hand, and we had companies on the other hand, and we tried to matchmake them in between. And we initially decided to aim for the tech developers and basically promise them, you can work remotely and have this amazing digital nomad type of lifestyle. And then we went to companies and say, like, hey, you have a shortage with tech developers, and you can really get them as long as you give them the lifestyle. And from there, we had like this vision of unlocking remote work, and then the whole ecosystem behind it, we would like in the end monetize. Was a bold vision, and in a way, and the tech side really liked it, and we got like lots of signups. Just like in a matter of months, we got, I think the cost per acquisition was 15 cents or something. People were really interested in it. We had people from over 150 countries, even from McKinsey, Google, Goldman Sachs, like really strong people. And then we went to the consumer side was locked in, and at that time I would say it was like a hype. We got the investors in, people wanted to work for us. You really felt like a bit like immortals, so to speak. And then basically we had to focus on the other side, which we thought like was very easy, because for companies it was a no-brainer with strong profiles to adopt remote work. And then we really tried like everything, different types of customer segment, different types of propositions, different types of approaches. And what we then really learned that companies weren't too fond of it. Everyone had like a different reason for it pre-COVID. But where I really see this disillusionment coming is that at some point it starts happening something with the team. If you feel there is no success, you start to run against like culture problems, and you have to motivate them in a different way. You get like certain issues on things. You also have to really focus on managing your relationship with your co-founder well, which I think we did well, but it was definitely something we had to be aware of. And then at some point you feel it's not going to work, even though you put tremendous amount of work and hours into it. And that's why I basically look at it and say, like, I've seen the bright side, that everyone wants to cover you and is very excited about you, but also the downside and what then happens with a startup.
This is quite good also because we are seeing this new generation of VCs with strong operator experiences, right? And you can really now in the investor side again, you can understand what is going on the operator side, especially the psychological changes and personal development transformations that I think it's one of the main issues on scaling up a company, right? It's avoiding the process that we can become the bottleneck of growth of the company, and we can also suffer a lot as a human being in the process of scaling up a company. Unfortunately, nowadays, if we are well surrounded, we can make it not easy, but a little bit easier and less suffering that experience, right? So in that sense, go ahead, Arthur.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And just from my own experience, I've seen that I had at some point 2 board members and advisors, Andreas and Victor. And if your business is not going well, just the way they treated and supported me, even though they knew at some point it was not going really to work out, from that experience, you learn so much, which you can actually also give back to founders that you support. And especially what you say on this mental perspective, but also your attitude as a board member. In addition to indeed looking from an operator point of view to supporting a business.
Absolutely. I love it. So introductions then, also a disclosure. We had the privilege of working together at Smart Protection. I'm advising the CEO, Javier Pereira, and the leadership team. And Knight Capital is one of the investors of Smart Protection as well. So really privileged to work together there and to keep scaling Smart Protection and democratizing brand protection. But I would like also to introduce an amazing job that you have been doing and that you were kind enough to invite me to participate in, which is the book. So I will let you introduce the amazing book that you are putting together.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. It's the book is called Leaders of Growth. And what we've seen and why we actually started writing it is that we've seen a lot of founders having questions about how do you scale a company. We see there is a lot of content available on how to get to product market fit, and there is a lot of content available on like big successful exits from founders, who started unicorns or raised hundreds of millions of euros. But this sort of in-between state, let's call this Series A to Series C, broadly defined, there isn't a lot of information for that. And at the same time, we see there are lots of questions. Exactly. This is from as founders, but also from our investor practice. So that's why we decided to write a book, which is very similar, I would say, to Tribe of Mentors from Tim Ferriss, but then I would say on company growth. So what we do...
Love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great concept from Tribe of Mentors. It's actually helped myself. So it was like a huge inspiration for this book. And where it's about, we describe how do you get from Series A to C, and what are the challenges you get across, and how do you deal with those. And we just discussed this with what we say 47 experts, like founders, operators, or industry experts on how to do that. And then we bundled that together in the book.
I really love it, and the inspiration, and totally agree. This kind of mid stage from Series A to Series C in B2B SaaS, and also from kind of 1 to 10 million ARR, right? It's there is a lot, because usually I think you are completely right. And for instance, if I think about the podcast, The Masters of Scale, it's really focused on very large corporations nowadays. Of course, we have been startups and scale-ups at a certain point. Of course, there are other podcasts that I really enjoy, like SaaSter and SaaS Talk, which are close friends of the ecosystem, who has contributed a lot. But in terms of a book, there is not so many playbooks and a book available on how to go from 1 to 10 million ARR, really with focus on this size. And I'd like to share the stats that only 4% of all companies are able to get to 1 million in revenues, and only 0.4% to 10 million, which shows that the 10% of the ones who only 10% of the ones who get to 1 million are able to get to 10 million. I will repeat, only 10% of the ones who get to 1 million are able to get to 10 million, which are talking about 0.4% of all companies. And 200 million, it's under 0.04%. Under 10% go from 10 to 100 million. So which means that the ones who are, as you said, successfully found product market fit and were able to start up the company in this early stage of scale up, or the mid stage, as you were classifying, the 1 to 10, 10% are so 90% are also killed along that stage. So in that sense, I think that's a great contribution with this book. So congrats again, and privileged to have participated with 2 cents in being one of the interviews. Right?
Yeah, thanks a lot, and also for sharing these statistics. I actually didn't even know it.
I should have shared. That's in our call at the time.
Yeah, then it would have worked harder, just to meet all the deadlines. Yeah.
And okay, perfect. So let's cover some of the topics that are in the book, and other ones from your own thoughts that might not be on the book as well. But let's start with the first one. Here we always cover 3 critical ingredients to scale, kind of our principles, the patterns that we see working with multiple VC-backed companies across the last 15 years. And kind of the first one is radical focus. Number 2 is world-class leadership. And number 3, the execution operating system or execution machine. And we keep iterating on those 3 principles and making it more clear. But I think that's the first topic that we both would like to discuss here, that I think that you have amazing insights, is really related with that radical focus on creating that strategy model, that revenue machine, as I like to call it. So what are some of your thoughts on that, on the options that companies have in order to grow or scale?
Yeah, great. So what we have developed internally, and we took the Ansoff model as an inspiration for that, is that we have designed like a framework on how to grow, because especially if you hit Series A or Series B, the options are paramount. So what we like to focus at is we have designed this model as follows. It starts with like a winning aspiration. And then second, basically, what do you want to achieve? And the second element is how do you win? How do you win? What's your differentiation in the company? But the thing where we focus most on is this is this first decision that you have to make is, do you want to penetrate or do you want to expand in your current market? And in that framework, we spend most of the time thinking about where do you want to play as a company. And just to make that a bit more concrete, because this is, I think, where all the options come into, because you have developed your product, your differentiation is quite clear. And where to play, I see like a couple of options, which are like, which countries do you want to play in? Which industries do you want to play in? Which customer segments are you going to serve, like enterprise, mid-market, SMB? And also, which distribution models are you going to leverage, like outbound, inbound channel, and whatnot? And also, like, what are you going to do with product? Are you going more like wide, or are you going a bit more like deep? And if you then first describe like where are you now, and then describe where are you like in 18 months, or maybe even like in a longer period, you can directly see like, okay, how many strategic bets am I going to place in this coming 18 months? And is this actually attainable, or is it actually too broad, and should you narrow your scope? Mm-hmm. And this is, I would say, just starting with writing that. That's, I would say, the first thing what we always start doing and what we discuss with founders.
Absolutely. From my experience with every single CEO and leadership team, it's a huge fight on this, because it's very counterintuitive, right? So in this kind of the Champions League of business, or the Olympics of business, I like to call the VC backed industry, we know the stats, we just shared them. So under 0.04% are able to get 200 million. So, and that is the journey of a VC backed company, go from 0 to 100 million plus in less than a decade. And I would say that even in 12 or 15 years, I think it would be already a very good milestone, or an amazing, legendary milestone. Of course, if we are able to do in 5 or 7, that is really historical. And in that sense, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things which I think there is like a big misconception about is this concept of product market fit. I came to agree that I agree less and less with the concept. It's now, I think it's how I interpret it, how it's often perceived. It's like you have product market fit, and from there you scale. However, and maybe you get to you get to 1 million in ARR with that. But in order to grow to 10 million ARR, as your statistic said, or even to 100 million, you have to start playing in geographies, in industries, in different customer segments. You have to launch additional distribution channels in order to grow to that level. And interestingly, that all those different steps, you need to get product market fit in that sort of bucket. And that's why I don't think a company can really realize like one product market fit. You potentially, in order to reach like 100 million, you potentially need to hit like 100 out of that. And that makes it so incredibly hard. But that's also why, for instance, scaling is not one-dimensional.
I love it. That's a great point, and why I love to talk about the radical, when we discuss these critical ingredients, the radical focus, always playing in the short, the mid, and long term. Usually founders and CEOs and leadership team all get that we need to work on the short and the long term, but what misses is the midterm. The midterm is what you are just explaining, right? In the short term, we need to exploit, double down on what is already working. For instance, in terms of geography, if we are playing in 3 geographies and one of them is performing the best, let's not reinvent the wheel, just double down on where we are scaling and where the market is telling you that we can do better. But if we are not working already in the second geography and trying to find product market fit, so when we get the next threshold of revenue, we have it ready to scale. If we start only working that on the short term, it's too late. So that's why we need to really have this exploit and explore mentality, as you said, kind of scaling up in one variable and starting up in another variable, so it is ready to scale up when we need that variable to go to the next threshold. It can be from 5 to 10 or 10 to 20, while we are exploiting the current one to go from 1 to 5, or from Series A to Series B. So that's really a great point.
Yeah, Thanks a lot. I often see. I think you also mentioned it actually in the book. What the point I really liked was that you have to plan 12 to 24 months ahead of where you will be in order so that you will be at the right stage in time.
Absolutely. Great. I'm not sure if you would like to add something else on the conceptual framework for scaling. It's all good in that point. You also have an interesting concept that you shared with me that we didn't have the opportunity to chat about it yet. So I'm really curious in this interview to kind of go through my curiosity. So you're talking about the concept of having an aid of scaling. So what is an aid of scaling, and why we need them?
Yeah, it's really something that after doing a lot of research, talking with all the people like yourself, I really figured out it's a lot to work on. Like I see maybe like a COO is often focused on what is the business right now, whereas I think the head of scaling, who can ideally be under the COO, is basically focused on 12 to 24 months ahead of the business. And I think the critical gap that this person fills is, if I look to Series A or Series B type of companies, I see strong functional leaders. So for instance, you have a marketeer, like a CMO or VP of marketing, who's very strong in, for instance, demand gen, or knows basically how to create content. But really scaling an organization and having that conceptual framework in mind, for instance, thinking about, what KPIs do I need to measure, what people do I need, what documentation, processes, and tooling do I need, and a bit more from an organizational point of view. I do not always see that being present, at least in the companies that I've seen from my side, and that's where I think that head of scaling, not of sailing.
This is also important. Ups and the different waves.
Yeah, exactly. Like for instance, that person who have either done it like before or who have a bit of like a McKinsey type of background can really be a value add to a company, to prepare the company for the next stage, so to speak.
I love that point, and just to kind of build on that, it's really at a certain point the founder started the company because it's kind of a rebel mentality, the entrepreneurial mentality that wants to break the rules, right? At a certain point, it feels that he has created his own prison. So now he has a company that, in order to scale, needs to follow rules, needs to follow systems, processes. And if there is no structure, it will not be able to scale, but still needs that spark, that vision, that reinvention, that artistic part. If not, we will just present the playbook of how to scale a company, and we would assure that the input will get an output, which is a successful 100 million plus business, and our business will be quite easy, right? So we would just implement the framework and it will be done. But we know that it's not only the science of scaling, there is also the art of scaling, and that's what entrepreneurs are needed. So I think that in that sense, when the company starts being a prison for the entrepreneur, he misses the freedom, he misses the creative art, and that's the moment that you should bring kind of a COO, which will be kind of the internal CEO and structure everything, and you will be focused more in the specific function or in thinking about the future, evangelizing, being the communicator, the spokesperson, and being much more off or hands off in the business. What I like about it is that the COO will also be overwhelmed with so much things to do. And in that sense, this second level, I think it's brilliant. The head of scaling that would kind of focus much more on that midterm that usually we see. It's very difficult to, it's so many variables, so many balls in the air, that again, this is not the job of a superhero, as I like to say, it's a job of a super team. And I think that's, again, that complementarity of the CEO, the leadership team, the COO, and the head of scaling, it's quite a good point. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, definitely most welcome.
And you also wanted to share some HR learnings that you have been observing as an operator and as an investor that might be relevant for the founders, CEOs, and executives that are listening to the Scaleup Valley podcast.
Yeah, definitely. One of the consistent things I learned from the people in the book, and what I've seen like firsthand myself, is that initially when a company is in early stage, let's take like the seed round as an example, but some could also include like Series A. You're really looking for T-shaped people. They are basically jack of all trades. They have a very broad skill set, but it's not very deep. But basically, as the company grows, everything starts getting more complex, and also the requirements start getting different, and you get more people in. Then I see this basically T-shaped getting narrow. So basically, it's getting less wide, it's getting more deep. And then if you get to Series C, Series D, or basically, I would say a large company, 25 million or 50 million plus, you really start getting more of these I-shaped people who are not that broad, but know a lot about a specific topic. And what is important with this is, if you make your HR planning, is to think like, okay, where will I be in 12 to 24 months? And what type of profiles do I need? But also, if you, for instance, you want to hire, for instance, like a CMO, and you get now someone in from, let's say, from Microsoft or from Zendesk, who's currently like the CMO. It's an absolute top profile, and the person is very skilled. But if you're in a Series B stage company, potentially this person is like very I-shaped and not very, still a bit T-shaped, what you need. And having that perspective maybe helps you as a mental framework to know what type of people that you need.
That's really a great point, and it makes me think about, kind of as we do with product, creating different versions of everything. Kind of the radical focus on the revenue machine. You have different versions for different thresholds of revenue. In terms of a leadership team, I like to call the leadership team 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 for Series A, Series B, Series C, and even with iterations in between rounds. And also the execution machine or the execution operating system also needs to have different versions. So if the systems to lead the business are too complex in the beginning, if they're kind of corporate oriented for a startup, it will not work. If you have a scale up and you are still trying to manage the company, lead the company with a startup cockpit, it will not work as well. And it kind of fits the same kind of thought process in the type of roles that you feel. So they need to be able to solve the issues and the problems of that particular stage of growth. If possible, if you can find a profile that is able to go from one or two stages, that would be the ideal, because if you have to change all the seats from stage of growth to stage of growth, this also creates a cultural and execution problem.
Yeah, definitely. I think a person we both know, the CRO of Divi, I think he really made like a great point, because I also asked him like, how do you get from seed stage all the way, to like, I think Series D or something, couple of 100 million raise. How did you make that transition? And according to him, if I interpret him correctly, it really has to do with the mindset of the person, that you, for instance, like read a lot, and that you're not, in my own words, lazy to reinvent yourself. And I think that's a unique breed, because most of the people don't make it across stages. But if you can hire those people in the early days, if you recognize that talent, I think that goes a very long way, because as you say, you lose so much knowledge if people drop out after every stage of where the company is.
So that's a great point, and something that I also learned in the podcast with Sterling, the CRO at Divi, that we both know, that I recommended for the book to Arthur, is it's helped a lot to kind of bring a core team from a previous venture that they already know each other. So it increases the speed a lot as well. And we are seeing kind of even the PayPal mafia effect. So all the members of that leadership team went out to create the next generation of billion-dollar companies. So which is quite impressive if you want to search online PayPal mafia for our listeners. I think you will see the impact that one single leadership team can have in one ecosystem.
Yeah, and to build on that, I think it's a really strong point. One of the things I learned in the book, with very lines with what you just said, is that you you shouldn't only hire, let's call it newbies, people who do it for the first time. Like even if they have worked in a corporate, who are doing it for the first time, you should really build in a company this combination of people who have done it before, who have been 12 to 24 months ahead of where you are today. And on the other hand, you can have these talents who can be sort of mentored by the people who have done it before. And really getting this balance is so vital in order to succeed. Because these PayPal mafia persons, what they could bring in and avoid like all the mistakes that you make when you're like in hyperscale mode. That's so important, because otherwise you make all mistakes which you shouldn't make before.
It just pointed out one of the most important things that you need to, again, to think strategically about the different versions of your leadership team. So, and diversity is one of them. If you are trying to create a global company, you really need to have different geographies or different nationalities there with different experiences, scaling in different geographies, in the industries where you want to scale. So you really want that diversity also in terms of gender, et cetera, et cetera. But that's really something important to plan. And again, that's so many variables to be on top of that sometimes we let some of them go down. And that's why you need a super team and not a superhero leading the company.
Yeah, I cannot agree more.
And is there any other points? Of course, there are so many more points that we need to cover by especially reading the book, Leaders of Growth, and getting you back later when the book is more spread out. But is there anything you'd like to highlight before we wrap up, Arthur?
Yeah, I think there are two things. One is for the founders. And the other comment is for the potential head of scaling. I think for the founder, something I find very, very important, what I got from many people, focus on mental well-being, take your time off. As a founder myself, I also work like day and night, but try to discipline yourself to take time off. Also, really spend time on managing the relationship with your co-founder. Like for instance, just hire an executive coach. Even if the situation goes really well. And the last thing is get a mentor and surround yourself with people who have done it before. So that were some of the things that I find important. And why I find that is you see it's not often talked, but if you look to the number of the chance to get like a depression as a founder compared to like let's call it a regular person, is very high. I think it's 2 times the chance. So I think focusing on this, it's not often talked about, but I think it's very important in order to succeed in this so-called marathon. Mm-hmm. And the second point, which I would say is relevant for any operator, but specifically for the so-called head of scaling, is to, if you are thinking about scaling, the mental framework that we like to think about is to first think in dimensions, what do you have to take into consideration when you scale? And the second thing is to think in maturity stages. So if I talk about dimensions, I, for instance, talk about what is, if you, for instance, take sales, what is the main objective from sales in your current stage? What KPIs and data do you need to gather in your current stage? The same goes, what type of people do you need in your current state? What type of documentation and enablement materials are very important right now? What type of processes and tooling do you need? Mm-hmm. And that is like the dimensions where you have to look for now, but also 12 to 18 months ahead. So that on these dimensions, you actually know where you have to develop and can create this traditional gap analysis. And something I think I also want to say is on take maturity stages into account. I think especially if you're an insecure overachiever or like a maximizer, you want to create like a very scalable organization, which is maybe like for a Series D type of stage when you're just in Series B. So please recognize that there are different stages of maturity where you have to be in. So in the beginning, I usually see the seed stage. I see things are more ad hoc. Then when you work towards Series A, and in the Series A, it's more about fixing the basics. Series A to Series B, it's about having repeatable processes. Series B, I see more, it's about predictable processes. And onwards, it's really about doing things at scale. And therefore, it's not about scaling is not one dimensional. It's really about doing the right things at the right stage. And I can go much deeper into it, but this is just like a mental framework on how I basically build scaling roadmap myself.
Thanks for sharing, Arthur. I really love the concept of the insecure overachiever. Sometimes I even see myself on that concept, to be honest. And also other thing that I'd like to emphasize, it's what you said in the beginning of your additional points. I've also been through anxiety, depression, burnout myself. I would really, really recommend, and I'm really recommending all the CEOs that I work with, also not only to have an advisor and mentor, but also to have a therapist and a psychologist working with them. Because again, we can become our own most important enemy or bottleneck of growth. And there is so much things that we will face during this stage. And again, this is a very aggressive kind of growth and a very aggressive kind of learning. Not only the technical learning, I think that if we have a good team, we can go through that, but it's really the personal learning, getting to know about ourselves and facing our dark sides. And as you said, there is moments where the press, the investors, the clients, the team, all thinks that you are the best in the world, and other moments that everyone thinks that you should be out of the company as quickly as possible. And as I like to say, you were never so bad as you think in those low moments, and you were not so good as you thought in those high moments. So stay centered and stay also with the therapist. I think it's becoming kind of not the outliers, but an outlier thing, but a standard thing. We really need to have that psychologist in the team to work ourselves, because we are playing the Champions League. And if you see any professional athlete that is playing the Champions League, have a team of nutritionists, a team of psychologists, technical training, mental training, visualization training, sleep advice. So every single thing is really, they are really supported with the best of the best in their fields. Again, we can't do this alone. We need to have a super team, not to be superheroes. And before we wrap up, because we are already going very ahead in time, but I think it was deserved for everyone who is listening. If you would have the opportunity to meet yourself at the beginning of your career as an operator or as an investor or both, if you would give us kind of a sentence, what advice would you offer to your younger self?
It's a very interesting and great question. In all honesty, I think it's quite interesting to picture yourself that you've all envisioned it like early on. But maybe I ended up like as an investor, I made like lots of bets in my career, which could actually have gone the whole other way around. So I would say where I'm right now is partially mindset, but also a lot of luck. And I say to the people in my team, don't repeat my path. But what I would have recommended my earlier self is maybe if you want to become like a founder, join like a very successful company, just for instance, post Series B, where you have strong leadership and where you can learn a lot from. Rather than going early stage and that you have to figure out like everything yourself. And I think that in general is like a good recommendation. If you, for instance, want to, the same applies, for instance, if you're joining McKinsey, because you learn a lot there before. You learn a lot of life skills, which you can also learn yourself, but it just takes significant more time and effort, and there is a bigger risk to fail. So I would say your chance to succeed is higher if you already joined the successful early on. Excellent. I haven't chosen that path, and we see where I will end up. But it's been a nice journey so far.
Amazing, Arthur. Thanks so much for making the time, for joining us, and congrats again for the book Leaders of Growth. A pleasure to be part of it.
Thanks a lot, Mike, also for your contribution. It was really great.
Awesome. And to our community, as you can see, we keep bringing you the best of the best and the best resources possible. Now, Arthur has put it together with his co-authors, the book Leaders of Growth, another resource to help the ecosystem to scale and make your life easier in your journey to scale your business. See you soon and keep scaling.